Whether you are taking a placement test to determine your foreign language level, or you are preparing for the speaking portion of an official exam to prove the level that you already have, I have made this video to walk you through my whole process and how I prep so you know the necessary steps to take to place into the language level that you want in a course or earning that official language certificate at the end. Plus, you will get to watch my whole speaking placement exam at the end of this video. Now, it is very important to consider what your own background that you already have for taking exams. In regards to my general background, I've done both the official DELE exam for Spanish this year. I've also done placement exams for getting into college level courses for German, and I've always placed at the level that I have wanted. Now, the language I'm going to be using to show you how I prep for an actual exam is going to be Levantine Arabic, because I am going to Jordan this year in order to really improve my Arabic. I have plans to place into the low intermediate level. So think about what your own backgrounds with one, your language, and two, your experience in taking actual language exams, whether placement or certificate ones, that can help you better determine your own personalized factors that you need to be reviewing before actually taking the exam. Plus, what amount of time is ideal for you to feel good enough to have this preparation time so that you can go into the exam less frustrated and less stressed. I knew about my placement exam about 2 months in advance, and I've also studied Arabic on and off for about 3 to 4 years. Now, knowing all of this information will help us determine what our goals for the exam are. Technically, placement exams don't require any preparation. However, if you're like me and you have ambitious goals and you want to take an advantage of a fully immersive environment where the teachers only speak to you in your target language, then that is why I mainly like to learn the basics, A1 to A2 materials by myself, and then B1 is really where it's at, where I get a lot of the immersion and a lot of better assistance in how to intuitively think in the language. I just think it's a better use of my time whenever I get to be in a country studying abroad at a school. Also, with setting goals, especially thinking about what level you want to get to, I like to set my goals not too high, not too low, but just right. I never got past a B1 by myself with self-study. Usually that was my go-to method, was teaching myself Arabic. And so I'm not expecting myself past the level that I know that I could reach by myself in a reasonable amount of time in the past. So think about your own expectations. Are you setting them too high, too low for your personal situation, or can they be just right and a little bit challenging for you? Another great question to ask yourself is, how will the exam be given? So sometimes I do these exams obviously in person, especially for getting official language certificates at the end. But I've also done placement exams, especially with just talking on the phone, even without seeing a face. I am prepping myself to expect at least a phone call and probably a video call as well, just so they can make sure that I'm probably not cheating, since this is an exam that will be done virtually and I'm not reading off anything or I'm not looking up anything in an online dictionary. Next question to ask yourself, which kind of goes into what we talked about at the very beginning of this video, is what is your background with this language? Specifically, how long of a break have you taken from the language? Are you refreshing it? Has it been a language that you have been super consistent with, so you really don't need to review anything and now can fine-tune or even learn new skills to apply in the actual placement exam, so you have a chance at getting placed a little bit higher? Plus the amount of time that you have to dedicate before taking the actual exam, right? All of this will determine if you really need to focus more on reviewing and refreshing the language, or, as I said before, fine-tuning what you already know well in the language due to your consistency, learning it up to this point, and even adding a few new skills onto it. I have taken a break from Arabic for about 1.5 years, so I need a lot of review, and I'm not going to make myself learn any other new skills beyond what I can easily refresh from the past. Next, we love setting schedules here. So what I'm going to do is think first, how much of a time commitment do I have in order to prep for this language exam? So I definitely had a busy schedule during those 2 months of preparation for Arabic. I even had 2 weeks where I really knew that I would not have any energy to really study Arabic anyways. So I made it a point to review and refresh the language, and knew that I could only realistically review about 4 times a week from 20 minutes to 2 hours, depending on how busy I was that day or my energy levels. Now, after setting a schedule, I would find my review resources. Because I have such a flexible schedule, I don't want to actually use any of that 20 minutes to 2 hours in order to just find resources and do research, right? That is outside of my review time. And I also just don't want to overwhelm myself with new resources. So because I'm mainly refreshing and reviewing what I already know, I loved to go back to my previous resources that I already knew were effective for me to learn from the beginning before I took that 1.5 year break from Arabic in the first place. This would include Mango Languages, which really helped me lay a foundational vocabulary of A1 to A2. Plus, I knew it would help me regain some of that intuitive feel for the language, even just listening to it again, reading it again, and starting to pronounce exactly what the app was telling me whenever I learned a new word. Also Minerva for a full sort of textbook review on grammar, some new vocabulary words, as well as general word structure order. So I knew books 1 and books 2 of that series would help me regain and refresh that knowledge all the way up to where I needed to be. And the third and final resource was something for comprehensible input. And because I knew I would only have about 2 months to prepare for all of this, I chose podcasts that even when I was a beginner in are just in Arabic, because I remember in the past I had listened to them so much that I didn't really need a lot of help figuring out the context from, even though the vocabulary words they were using in these all Arabic podcasts were definitely above my level. But I also knew in using these comprehensible input podcasts, I would be able to probably reproduce at least a little bit more advanced vocabulary in the placement exam as well. So I chose Levantine with Livy and Madhab Dane, both hosted by non-native Arabic speakers. So I planned to cycle through these resources for the next 2 months, just depending on my energy levels would also depend on which resource I pulled out that day. So if I had higher energy one day, then I would just turn to my textbook and really get down to the nitty-gritty of reviewing grammar. If I had medium energy, I would usually turn to Mango Languages as an app, and if I had very low energy, I would usually just review flashcards on Mango Languages or listen to comprehensible input with either of my podcast choices. I also planned to do about 4 conversation lessons with a tutor. Now, I tend to talk myself out of doing these a lot, especially if I've taken a really big break from a language. However, I knew that I was going to do a speaking exam, so realistically, I needed to do at least a little bit of talking. Now, the week of the oral speaking exam, I was indeed able to speak about 4 or 5 times with my Syrian Arabic tutor, and I was also able to write a little bit more in Arabic with friends and acquaintances who I had met in Istanbul when I was there. I had only finished about 1 unit of Mango Languages. Originally, I wanted to finish all of the units, but honestly, just for a placement exam and knowing that I just want to at least get placed into B1 and assuming that the tester is only going to see my general knowledge of the language and my command of it, that's kind of how I was able to tell myself that I could back off and not be too sad about not doing all of the unit vocabulary included in the 5 units of Mango. Same thing with book 1 to book 2 of Minerva. I actually didn't get through all of book 2, even though I did finish book 1. But again, I knew that during a placement exam, they were going to want to look at my overall usage of the language. And I did feel that I at least reviewed and refreshed enough of the grammar to better internalize how I could use it in a casual conversation. So being really close to the placement exam, I knew that about maybe 3 to 4 days before doing the actual exam, I would pick out certain grammar structures that I knew would be a little bit more advanced and make sure to use them as best I could during the placement exam itself. On the day before and the day of, I also talked only to myself in Arabic as much as I could to really warm my brain up for what was coming. I also made sure on the day that I picked to do the exam, I didn't have any other obligations on me, right? Because that can kind of get me a little bit stressed. So just doing the exam and then calling it quits for the rest of the day after. Also on the day of, about 3 hours before the exam, I only listened to Levantine with Livy, the same 3 or 4 podcast episodes over and over, because I said I had wanted to use at least a few more B1, B2, more advanced vocabulary words in my speech, kind of doing an input warm-up, if you will, so that I could more easily retrieve them from my brain as I was speaking to this person. And with the preparation of going into the exam, I had 3 mindset shifts in place. I told myself, whatever happens, you are doing the best that you can do. It's not the end of the world, whatever result you get. And everyone involved has your best intentions at heart, and they're not giving you this test hoping that you will fail. So don't worry about that. Turn nervousness into excitement. There's actually a lot of research that tells us that some of the same chemicals that produce nervousness in our bodies also produces excitement. So honestly, when we are nervous, we can convince ourselves we are excited and get really pumped up for it so that this energy can propel us forward into more of a positive state. And the third is actually plan to say that I am nervous during the exam. I feel that when I am acting like I'm trying to hide that I'm nervous, then that really builds up in my body and makes me pause or stutter even more. So you'll see in this clip that I'm about to show you, say that I'm nervous to the teacher. And that really helps me be less nervous by the end. So check out how my speaking exam went. Enjoy.
مرحبا.
كيف حالك؟
أنا منيحة. ماشي الحال. وكيفك؟
الحمد لله. أنتي أملي صح؟
إيه صحيح.
أهلا وسهلا يا أملي. أملي ممكن تحكي لي عن حالك لو سمحتي؟
إيه أكيد. ما بعرف من وين لازم ببلش. أنا من أمريكا. صار لي عم أدرس اللغة العربية من 4 سنين، بس في كتير يعني كان في كتير فواصل. بلشت طريقي مع اللغة ب 2018 لما كنت ساكنة بألمانيا، لأنه أكيد في كتير ناس عم يحكوا بالعربي هناك.
حلو. وين درستي؟
بالجامعة اسمها دورتموند أونيفرسيتيت بالألماني.
بألمانيا.
إيه بالضبط. أكبر شغفي تعليم اللغات الأجنبية، عشان هيك عم يعني أنا كتير متحمسة عشان ممكن أروح عمان بعد شهر. عم فكر بمهنتي، مثلا سجلت بالجامعة بولاية أركنسا بجنوب بأمريكا، ودومت 2019. بس قررت يعني قبل ما دوامت قررت كمل مع طريقي كراقصة مع الباليه. وبس يعني من لما قررت اخد هذا الطريق، بعد ما رجعت على برلين بألمانيا، يعني لثالث مرة بحياتي، شفت انه ما حبيت كتير هي المهنة. واكيد كتير شي صار معي بهديك السنة، لانه اجت وباء كورونا، واكيد ما في شغل كتير، ما كان في شغل كتير.
انت بكورونا كنت بألمانيا؟
ايه اكيد. كنت عم اشتغل كراقصة. اذا مش ممكن اني بكون مع الناس بنفس الغرفة، ما راح يكون في ولا شغل بالنسبة لي. وكمان يعني راح يكون في لغات تانية بالمستقبل، بس راح نشوف شو راح يصير. لازم حسن مستوعي بالعربي اولا.
حلو. بس انت بتحكي سوري، مين درسك السورية؟ حلو. طيب سافرت على الشرق الأوسط من قبل أو لا؟
بفكر إنه بشكل عام لا أبدا ما قدرت أسافر هنا. نحن عم نحكي عن مقرباتي مع اللغة العربية، يعني إذا كان في أستاذ أو إذا أخذت دروسي مع أستاذ أو لا. صحيح؟
أيوة صح.
إيه كان في أستاذ يعني استخدمت موقع italki. أكيد هذا أستاذ من سوريا. برا هي دروس. أكيد كان بدي اكتشف أكتر لحالي. درست كتير قد ما قدرت وبس وصلت لهي المرحلة هلا.
حلو ما شاء الله ما شاء الله ما شاء الله، يعني عربيتك ممتازة كتير. طيب احكي لي شو هواياتك؟
أنا متوترة شوي من الامتحان عشان
بسيطة أبدا، بالعكس يعني احنا بنحكي، احنا مش في امتحان.
مرات ما مش خاطرت عبالي ولا شيء. بحب كمان أحضر الأفلام.
شو فيلمك المفضل؟
يعني بحب كل الأشياء، تقريبا كل الأشياء اللي أحضرت بالماضي. ما بحب كتير لما أنا خايفة من الناس اللي بيكونوا عندهم دور رئيسي بأفلام. الموضوع يعني كتير خايف أو شي هيك. مخوف. إيه بشكل عام بحب كل شيء وين في إبداع، يعني في قيمة كتير خصوصية. كتير صعب علي إذا أنا بقول إيه بكرة هي يعني هذه الأشياء أو هي الأشياء. لسه لازم لاقي على الوزن بين شغلي وكمان هواياتي، لأنه هذا السؤال كتير صعب علي. أكيد عندي هواياتي بس عم ركز كتير عن شغلي هلا.
يعطيكي ألف عافية.
إيه وعلى يعافيك.
Okay, so you guys saw all of my process. I'd be interested in the comments below in you sharing any of your ways of prepping, and otherwise I will catch you in another video soon.